It's the lost version of the book Dracula. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Today we are talking with Ichishita and Jeff Allen from the Powers of Darkness podcast, which is all about the lost version of the book Dracula. Guys, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Sean.
It is fabulous to have you. So, just real quick, as we get into this, for anyone who is not familiar with what Powers of Darkness is and what this lost version of Dracula is all about, can you give us a short primer?
Man, I am so close to this, and I look constantly to Jeff Allen here for perspective. But sure, I can give it a try. You know, in 2017, Hans de Roos published the English translation of the Icelandic Powers of Darkness. This rocked the Dracula world. It was an entirely new take on Dracula, and the speculation was that it was based on perhaps an early draft of Bram Stoker's Dracula itself, right? And it spawned a lot of research. And it also spawned some additional research into the Powers of Darkness story itself, which revealed that there was a Swedish version that predated the Icelandic version. So the Swedish version, called Morkrit's Makter, the Icelandic was called Makt Mirkrana. Morkrit's Makter predated the Icelandic version by, well, depending on which version, a couple months or about a year. And so the Swedish version was then translated by both Will Trimble and Rickard Berghorn and made available in English, and has spawned additional research. So basically, the overarching Powers of Darkness story is that there is a radically adapted version of Dracula that was available in Europe for 120 years before we ever even, today realize that it existed.
That's excellent.
It wasn't on my radar either. Like, the first time I had ever heard about any of this, and I've always been a Dracula fan. I read the original when I was a kid and seen all the movies, loved it. I'd never heard about any of this until Iris had sent me the pilot episode of Powers of Darkness, and I did what I think most people do, is like, wait, what? What did you just say? What do you mean there's a different version of Dracula that's been around for 100 years? And how is it that we only just realized this, like, what, in 2014-ish? It's crazy to think that there were whole nations reading Dracula, and it's not Dracula. It's like Iris said, a radically different version of it. So it's kind of a coup. It's kind of a really interesting new thing that's breathing new life into this, undead story of the last 100 years.
Yeah, this is absolutely fabulous, and I hope I'm not sort of burying the lead here by saying that the authorship of this Swedish version is a complete mystery, and this is what excites me so much about the podcast that you guys have coming up, is that I'm assuming that you are going to go into, in great depth and detail, your research on who might have written this book. Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. Real quick, Iris and I are going to completely nerd out about this in just a little bit. In fact, I will put a countdown clock up that counts down to when that happens. But before we get to that, if you guys could just sort of let me know sort of what do we have to look forward to in this podcast? Like, what if you had to sum up, what is this podcast about? Hit us with that.
You want me to go first? Okay. Well, I think it's fun that I'm here because I know the least about this topic. I'm the newest to it in this group here. You both are like, like you said, you're going to nerd out. I'm going to be a great stand-in for the viewing audience. I'm going to ask questions that I know that they're going to be asking because I'm relatively new to all this. Right?
Well, and just real quick, Jeff, I'm sorry, I should have done this right at the front. please introduce who you are and what you have to do with the show.
So I'm a marketer, really, and I'm friends with Iris. Iris and I have a history. We've been producing partners for many years, and she has her own podcast, or whatever movies podcast, that she's been doing for years with her brother Wesley. It's really good. If you're a movie aficionado, they do really great movie reviews. It's called Or Whatever Movies. Iris is obsessed with this Powers of Darkness thing, with the Dracula lore in particular. And when she found out about it, she did what Iris does, and she turned it into art. And she shot one pilot episode of it, of the podcast, through the lens of Or Whatever Movies, that's going to like take a deep dive now into something that's going to be serial podcast. And she sent me like basically episode one of it. And I tell you, I've been listening to Or Whatever Movies podcast for a long time. When I listened to this first episode, I was on a long drive up to the mountains of Arizona, up to Prescott, Arizona, and it blew my hair back. And I sent Iris this like really long text message saying like, I don't know what this is, but it's my new favorite thing. I want in. What can I do? And I'm a marketer by trade, right? So I naturally said, what we should do is we should really start talking about this now. Don't wait for October. Let's raise awareness. People are going to be really interested in this. And I begged her. I said, Iris, please let me market this thing for you. And she said, okay, fine, Jeff, go ahead. So I'm new. I'm relatively new to all of this, and I've been like, also obsessed with Dracula, just like getting little bits of information. But I'm a fan. I'm waiting for the remaining episodes of the podcast to come out also, so that I can hear the full story. So it's going to be fun for me to sit and listen to you guys and ask some of the questions that I'm sure the viewing audience has on their minds as well. Like, how is it possible that we didn't know about this for 100 years? And then how is it possible that like these independent researchers in independent countries at approximately the same time also translated the book, and now it's like they're at feuding with one another and at odds with one another? Like the drama's intense here. There's nothing better than a feud between literary scholars. Believe me, the gloves come off.
Yes, yes. So then, that is. Thank you, Jeff. That is an excellent backstory there. So, Iris, how about if you give us the same thing? How did you get bit by this book, as it were?
My brother and I were discussing Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula on Or Whatever Movies. The episode, for various reasons, we held back on releasing. So it's actually not available at Or Whatever Movies.
Okay.
But it may be. And we also have a whole slate of vampire movies that we're going to be reviewing and discussing coming out in September.
Yes, you are speaking my language.
Yes, I think, yeah, it's going to be really, really cool. And so you might get a sneak, or you might get a whiff of that then. But we were discussing Bram Stoker's Dracula. And after we stopped recording our episode, Wesley asked me if I had heard of the lost version of Dracula, Powers of Darkness. This was in probably 2019, I think it was. And so Hans Russ's translation had been out for a couple of years. I said, no, I hadn't heard of this. He told me a little bit about it, and it really piqued my interest. He kind of said very cavalierly, kind of off the cuff, hey, we should do a podcast about it. Now, at the time, he was thinking, let's read the book and talk about it, right? And then it's morphed and mutated into the monster that it has become today, the Powers of Darkness podcast, because after I got a copy of that 2017 book, I devoured it. And I thought that as interesting as the new text was, Dacre Stoker's introduction was even more interesting. And what Hans Russ had to say in his preface and his introduction really gripped me, right? It was the mystery behind the text that captured my imagination. And so it really went from there. I started lining up. I started reading more. I started watching more. I went headlong down the rabbit hole, and I started lining up interviews. And amazingly, I was able to secure interviews with the major players really early on in the evolution of this story.
That is awesome. That is very cool. And so you must have like at what point did you recognize that, oh no, this is not just a single hour's worth of presentation of research. Like this needs an entire multi-episode podcast?
I think really early on. And for some reason, actually, I know why, 6 episodes always seemed somehow right for this series. And as I've gotten deeper and deeper into it, uh, I think there's more. I think there's room for more with how deep this story goes. So I think that I realized it really early on, and I think it's because I knew that there was still a journey to take place, right? That this story isn't finished. It hasn't been written yet, right? It's still being written. We, even in this conversation itself, are part of writing that story.
It's very exciting because like as and this is I mean I'm not telling Iris this, she already knows this, I'm telling you guys this, that there this is such a crazy discovery, and the mystery around what this book is absolutely maddening. Did Bram Stoker have anything to do with it? Did he have any idea about it? There it has been, it has, without ruining it. So a couple of, I've been lucky enough to be able to interview both Dacre Stoker and Hans de Roos on this channel, as well as David Skal before he passed, and all three of them had different things to say about this book, any of which you can certainly go and listen to any of their interviews. But sort of the big sort of the big question that all these researchers care about is this possibly an earlier version of the Dracula manuscript that predates what was eventually published in 1897? And so as soon as I saw that these guys were going to be making an entire podcast about that, my heart just lit up. Because yeah, the talent that you've got coming in to sit for these interviews is mind-blowing. And it really is the top shelf of researchers who have to do with this question. And so I guess my question for you, and feel free to answer this however you want, because I don't want you to spoil anything. I want to sit and enjoy this podcast with everybody else and like discover what you've come up with as we go. But are we looking at just a straight up like, hey everybody, here are all the facts that we have, come to your own conclusions, or do you have a thesis that you think might answer this question and others that all of these episodes are going to sort of lead up to?
We think we have a thesis and an answer to these questions, at least in part.
That is excellent. That is excellent. So if somebody were to listen to this podcast, they would basically be taken down this road of discovery leading up to what it is you have found.
You got no idea like what Iris has been digging up. Like Iris is going deep. She's digging.
Yeah. It's
So
really exciting.
So all of this is going to culminate in this podcast that you guys are putting together, and you are running a Kickstarter for it right now. Tell us about, and by the way, I'll put a link to the Kickstarter down below. Absolutely, everybody go take a look at this. Take a look at the rewards that they offer. Put in some money if you can, so we can see this thing come to fruition. Tell us about the Kickstarter. What do people have to look forward to with that?
We're really proud of what we were able to put together. One, because we had the support of so many important people like Dacre Stoker, right? And so we were able to get these rewards that are really great rewards and to offer things that really make it worth it. So we're excited about all of that, but we're really excited about its potential to raise awareness and like get the word out early before October when we plan on launching the podcast. Because we really want to build a head of steam and get people excited, to listen to the podcast when it comes out. And we've already been notified by Kickstarter that we've achieved the Projects We Love designation. So they gave us the badges to use. So Kickstarter is clearly, we're on their radar. They know about the project. They're going to promote the project, which is great. So we really are so grateful for those that jump through the hoops to show that, hey, I can tell you're passionate about this. I can tell you're putting a lot of work and a lot of effort into this. And we just want to show a token of our appreciation and support. you and support the project. It means so much to us, and those are the ones that we're going to treat near and dear. So they're going to get notified first about everything. They're going to get special bonus episodes and collectible stuff that comes out, supplemental to this. One of the rewards is a limited edition Bram Stoker bobblehead that's signed by Dacre Stoker. There's only 25 of them. They will be gobbled up quickly. If you
That's
want one
awesome.
sitting on your bookshelf, like you can only get it on our Kickstarter. So check it out.
Okay, well, this is all very exciting. I'm wanting to nerd out about this book here, but before we do, is there anything that I haven't asked you guys that you would like to sort of talk about, sort of make known to everybody about this project?
I mean, I would say that this is a critical time in the evolution of this podcast, which in a very meta way is if I can say in all humility, a critical part of this overall story, right? Bringing it to light, bringing it to the masses, bringing it to the public in a way that is hopefully very accessible, digestible. I've taken a lot of time to craft this story in a way that that will be that the what how did you put it, Jeff? That the fans can appreciate, right? That it will speak to those who love it like you,
Mm,
Sean, but also make it accessible, make the story accessible to those who don't
mm.
have all of the backstory. Um,
That's what I love about it. It taps so many different like genres and subgenres. Like if you like Dracula, sure, no brainer, right? You like horror stories, it's gonna, you know, it's gonna surprise and delight in that regard also. But also if you like conspiracy theories, there are conspiracy theories. Like there's some big questions here. You know, did Bram Stoker know? Did he condone? Did he plan it? And if he planned it, it's diabolical a little bit, like a little bit. And what does that mean for like what happens today? Like the art that's put out today, books, movies, all of it. What is the role of the creator in these to ensure that you really are sowing these seeds in a way that they will virally spread? In today's viral culture, it's significant. And that I think is the most interesting thing for me. And it will be interesting for those that aren't, complete Dracula geeks. It's what it says about pop culture and the viral nature of art, and the role that that plays in propagating a work of art or a work of fiction.
That's excellent. One of the things that I really appreciate about what you guys are doing here is that for anyone who stumbles across this mystery, who hears the words "powers of darkness" and just sort of peels that layer back just a little bit, is that there is no one place where you can go to find out all this information. Like you can read the foreword of this dude's book, you can read the foreword of this dude's book, you can go and find a white paper that was published on it in, if you think to do that. But what you guys are doing is bringing all of the experts together into one place to basically share all of the information that exists so far and all of the research that's been done in the last several years. And that is invaluable. Like it is magnificent. And it's the type of sort of living record that I think this particular mystery needs. So thank you for putting this together and going down this road.
Man, that's really well said. Yeah, Iris did it so you don't have to.
That's good. Yeah, exactly. That's fabulous. And on that subject now, because journeying down this rabbit hole only leads to madness, we gotta talk, because you've now been steeping in this for a while, and probably longer than I have, but I have definitely been doing a ton of my own research on this thing on my own side. I'm sure that surprises everybody to hear, but I have absolutely nobody that I can talk to about this. Like even my vampire host friends are not as far as I know, they're not delving as deep into this stuff as I've found myself doing over the last couple months. So if you guys are okay with this, if you're okay with this, I want to nerd out about this book for a bit. And I think we should do that in 3, 2, 1. Okay, this is fucking crazy, right, Iris? Like this book is confounding. I don't there's
Mysteries upon mysteries upon mysteries, Sean.
there is when I first heard that this book is so that this version it came out so Dracula was published in 1897 and this Swedish newspaper serial came out in 1899.
That's right. It was June of 1899.
That is that is only 2 years after Dracula became available to the English reading audience for the first time, that it shows up in the Swedish newspaper and is twice as goddamn long as the actual novel itself and is wildly different. There's an entire underground pagan chapel under Dracula's castle where there's a virgin sacrifice that takes place in front of a congregation of like Neanderthal people. Like it is nuts. And then the book gets like very similar to the novel for a way through the entire all of Lucy's things that are going on up until her death. And then
Who was not in the Icelandic version, by the way. Lucy was omitted from Matmir Krana.
who is not for, and that's a whole other thing. Like the Icelandic version is this like it's basically just like it's the first third of the Swedish version, and then it's just like a couple chapters to wrap it up real quick because I guess nobody was reading it or something like that. Like nuts. But then but in the Swedish version, it then just takes this right turn, like, and just goes off into crazy land for chapters and chapters and chapters, and you've got like all these new characters coming in, and like there's some parts that are kind of similar to the novel, but like other parts that are just wildly different. It ends completely differently. There are completely different characters involved with killing Dracula at the end. There's this whole and here's the thing, and this is like I'm sorry, I'm just like completely vomiting all this up right
Letting
now.
the floodgates open, Sean.
But the thing that because like you could look at this and be like this Swedish version is just like I don't know, some Swedish editor was like, this Dracula book isn't bad, but I think I could do something better. And then, writes this much longer version that has like a lot more naked people in it and like an affair with Jonathan Harker and the Dracula's bride and like all this stuff. And you're just like, I mean, okay, so this is like a Dracula fan fiction that just goes off the rails. Like that would be the obvious leap to make. But then you've got Stoker's original notes that he was writing, just ideas that he was scribbling down about Dracula for years on like cocktail napkins and stuff like that. And those have survived. And when you look at his notes, there is fucking stuff in his notes that is in this wacky Swedish version. And you're like, there's no way some Swedish newspaper editor had access to Bram Stoker's cocktail napkins that were in a drawer of his somewhere. So is this? It's crazy. I mean, what is? Oh, sorry. I'm just going off here. Iris, help bring me down here. Like, what is happening here?
It's funny that you say like I have no one to talk to about this, and I can't say how many times I've heard this, and and it's not because, and there are more people I think than the public might expect, right? That have their own journeys with this, much like you. But it's true, we want to talk about it because there are mysteries upon mysteries upon mysteries. And I personally think it's a lot of fun to speculate on the possibility that Bram Stoker was involved. It makes it a more interesting story because, to your point, if it was fan fiction, then maybe that kind of makes us focus a little bit more on other mysteries, like
Right, right.
how, like why would someone who arguably improved upon a Gothic masterpiece, why would
Yep.
they not want to be credited, right? Why would
Yeah.
they choose to write under a pseudonym,
Yeah.
under the byline A-E, right? Why would, it's other mysteries. Why wouldn't they want to be credited? Who was this person and why were they equipped to build upon this basically foundation of an already incredible story and make it something radically different, right? That's a different mystery. Um, but the idea that Bram Stoker's notes, whether indirectly or directly, were incorporated into powers of darkness, I think makes it that much more tantalizing, that much more fun, that much more interesting. And we know about Bram Stoker. I mean, what he left behind was fairly limited, right? But as things continue to become unearthed about him, and even stories that he's written that were previously unpublished, right? The more we learn about Bram Stoker, the more fodder we have to find that connection between him and Powers of Darkness.
Right, right.
I have a
Yeah, and it,
question.
yeah.
Was Dracula when it first came out, was it like an instant hit, or did it take a while for it to build a head of steam and find an audience?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's yeah. From my understanding, kind of a little of both columns. So it sold well. It was not a runaway bestseller when it came out, but it had a lasting power that turned it into a classic. Whereas none of the other novels that Stoker wrote did. In fact, most people could not name another novel that Stoker wrote. And he wrote like 8 or 10 and a whole bunch of short stories and stuff like that. But Dracula is the only one that that sort of survived him and obviously became one of the great pieces of English literature. But yeah, at the time it was sort of like the reviewers basically said various versions of kind of the same thing, where they're like, this is trash. It is ghastly. It is just cheap horror, cheap thrills, but you'll be thinking about it for a long time. But it's very, like basically saying, like, I really enjoyed myself, but I don't feel comfortable telling you that I enjoyed myself reading this, is sort of what you can pick out of every one of those. So and obviously it was good enough, and it was working its way into the zeitgeist at such a speed that a Hungarian newspaper decided to serialize it without permission, as far as we know. That was the first one. Then this Swedish newspaper decided to make their publish a radically different version again. And then, obviously everybody knows that German Prana Films was like, oh, it's, Alban Grau was like, I love this book. I want to adapt this into Nosferatu, et cetera, et cetera. There were also a couple of, there's evidence that there were a couple of other Dracula movies that were made prior to Nosferatu, again, without permission. They have not survived, or at least no copies exist of it. So Dracula was popular enough for everybody to be stealing it back in those days.
Maybe that's all the proof you need, yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. But that gets back to like one of these fundamental questions is like, for this sweet, and this is like, there's so many, like every time you're like, aha, there's always a but that comes along with it when it comes to this. So like, before this Swedish newspaper serialized version, there was a Hungarian newspaper, like I said, that also serialized it. But they basically like took the novel like out of a bookstore in England, took it back to Hungary. I'm paraphrasing. We don't actually know what happened, but it's essentially a straight adaptation. Like, it's just a straight translation into Hungarian, and each chapter was in like another issue of the newspaper sequentially. But this Swedish version
Yeah, what
is
happened?
so different. Like, why would they not just do the exact same thing and just take the English novel and just translate it into Swedish? I mean, they're stealing it anyway. They're not paying any money for it.
Hmm.
So why rewrite the entire thing and make it twice as long? Like
Was that
that's the
popular? Was the Swedish published version of it popular right away? Why and how did it stay like contained to Sweden?
it's
Yeah, that's also a great question.
yeah. Those are great questions, Jeff.
Well,
Yes.
Sweden and Norway were of a united kingdom,
Hmm.
and in 1899, and this is per Professor Ingmar Sorman, who is a subject in the Powers of Darkness podcast, and he wonders himself, like, why wasn't there a Norwegian version, right?
Yeah.
If these countries were essentially one or at least part of the same kingdom, right? Why was it contained to Sweden? Was it popular? I guess is something that you can make extrapolations based on what happened in Iceland, right? In Iceland, even with the bizarro truncated ending, it was republished as a book in 1901. After the publications in various Swedish newspapers, Margaret's Makter kind of disappeared. I mean, it was in different registries, which is how, one of our Swedish scholars was aware of it, especially when the news broke about the Icelandic translation in 2017. But it was otherwise pretty obscured, right? And so it to your point, Jeff, right? Maybe it wasn't as popular because it didn't have that staying power. I'm assuming that's why you were asking about
Yeah,
how Dracula was received in England in
that's
1890,
right.
right? So that's one kind of educated like assumption we can make about how the Swedish Dracula, Morgoth's Mockter, succeeded back in the day.
Mm.
And there is if in fact the Swedish Dracula was just sort of like for whatever reason was the brainchild of some Swedish newspaper editor or hired freelance or something like that, then so be it. That's interesting by itself. But if this is an earlier version of Bram Stoker's manuscript, before it got edited down to what we all know, how did this manuscript get into the hands of a Swedish publisher? And why did he decide to print it 2 years after, translate it and
Hmm.
print it 2 years later after the English book had already come out?
Sure.
This is madness. Like,
Now,
there's no good answer for this.
well, we have an answer.
You have an answer.
Well, we know for various reasons, which will be revealed in the podcast.
Oh, I love it.
We understand. We have reason to believe that we can definitively say that it was not based on an early draft of Dracula.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
now that being said, it doesn't mean that we're excluding Bram Stoker from this equation. But what else I was going to say about that? But your question is precisely the question that set Hans de Roos off on his journey, right? He went down and he is still pursuing these avenues to understand the Swedish connection. How was Bram Stoker connected to Sweden? Now, and he can speak better to that than I can. But there's proof that he had correspondence with a Swedish family that the Stoker family was very close to. There is evidence of Bram Stoker's relationship with various newspaper editors internationally, right? Because of his involvement with newspapers in England for his day job, right? Having to manage publicity for Sir Henry Irving, right? And so,
Sure, sure.
so of course you can draw connections between British newspapers and other European newspapers and the relationship that those editors have. I mean, I think Hansers even went so far as to compare the rosters of I think it was a Swiss newspaper conference where British editors were present and Swedish editors were present, and maybe they were sharing, you were swapping notes, right? You just don't know. But this is the kind of research, this is the kind of digging that can yield this kind of information that can say, okay, yes, we can say pretty clearly that, well, we have our reasons to believe that this wasn't based on an early draft, but that there may still be a Swedish connection that's as yet unexplored.
Interesting. That is interesting. Oh boy, God, this thing, like every time, because I've done my own research on this and have found some interesting stuff. And like I say, there's not like it's maddening because at no point have I been able to find a smoking gun, but I have found some smoke, and I just wish I had a time machine.
Tell
and
us
could go
about it,
back and see.
Sean.
Oh
Tell
well,
us about this
it's
smoke.
not ready for prime time yet.
Oh,
I'm still compiling all
ooh,
my
you have
stuff.
your own secrets.
But yeah, no, it's but I so like as I regularly every time I present something at the Children of the Night Dracula Congress, I'm always like, so I'm the guy here who is not a professor. Like I'm not an educator. I'm not a researcher. I'm just a dude who works in Hollywood. So like the only perspective that I can bring to this is that perspective. But in reading the Swedish version, I was noticing shit that I was like, as a Hollywood person, there's some very obvious stuff going on here. And then I started doing some digging, and I was like, oh, because
Give us
here's
something. You're teasing too much, Sean. I need
yeah,
something.
I'm sorry. Here's the thing. So my path on this has been the very first interview that I did for this channel was with Dacre Stoker, and that was right about the time that that Hans had published the Icelandic Powers of Darkness. Nobody knew about the Swedish version yet; had not been announced. So in talking with Dacre, he was like, yeah, we don't know what this thing is. Hans and I have, obviously Dacre wrote the foreword for the book and everything. He's like, I suspect that this may be an earlier version of Dracula. And I was like, damn, that's interesting. Read the book, was like, oh my God, this is crazy if that's true. And then the whole Swedish version came. I was like, oh no, the Icelandic was just it was just a translation of the Swedish and an incomplete translation. So then reading the Swedish, like I talked with David Skahl was the next interview that I did that had anything to do with this. And he was like, yeah, I'm due to the fact that there's stuff in Stoker's notes that is in the Swedish version. My theory is that this was a previous version of the work that Stoker was sending out to editors to try and get published. And so this just was laying around somewhere and found its way into this Swedish editor's hands. In which case, that would be like, oh my God, this massive, twice as long version is like actually Stoker's work. And it's a prototype for Dracula. And then the next interview I did was with Hans de Roos about, as he was publishing his book of all the artwork from the Swedish newspaper serial. And at that point, he was like, yes, and my research now, originally, he was like, David Skahl and I were at that same conclusion, but I have now revised I don't think that this was an original version made by Stoker, that this was, in fact, a creation of a Swedish editor. It's just plagiarism, I'll stop. And I was like, oh.
But if Stoker, this is published 2 years after Stoker published the book, and so he catches wind of this as a work of plagiarism, certainly he takes some sort of legal action. There's got to be a paper trail, a lawsuit, a letter, something, cease and desist, man. This is my book. But nothing like that?
So nothing like that has ever come up. But also bear in mind that, the most public version of that we've seen is the litigation of Piranha Films for Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And that was very much like Florence Stoker had an entire law firm that was contracting to a law firm in Germany that was suing Piranha Films over there was all this stuff going on, and eventually it wound up in this, basically like Piranha was in the wrong, they went out of business, all copies of Nosferatu were supposed to be destroyed. There's now Lockie Heiss has basically said, yeah, but it was never actually, like, no copies ever were destroyed. Like, they were mostly gone by that time anyway. Film was just recycled back then, so they were all mostly gone. But to get back to your point, the records of all of that extensive litigation are gone. They don't exist. And like, this was a very high profile case of, hey, you stole my husband's work, I need to be compensated for that. And there's almost no legal record for it at all.
Weird.
And whether that's due to then World War II happened and a lot of stuff got blown up, or it was just like, well, that's over, stick it in the fireplace and let's move on. We've all spent our money. So yes, obviously it would be amazing if somebody could find any document where, like, even Stoker or his wife would have been like, hey, you guys, we need to get paid for this. That would be amazing. But to get back to what I was saying earlier, so like, I was after Hans was like, yeah, I don't think this is an earlier version of Dracula. I was like, oh, and I was crushed, obviously, but that's like, you know, the road leads where the road leads. But then in reading the Swedish version and comparing it to the English version, chapter by chapter, and going through Stoker's notes with a fine-tooth comb, I started to be convinced back the other way around again, that this is, in fact, Stoker's work. So, not 100%, obviously. Names were changed. You know, obviously, like, for example, sorry everybody, I'm just going off on this, but in the Swedish version, Jonathan Harker's name has been changed to Thomas Harker. Okay, that's kind of weird, but all right. You could make a case for, you know, a Swedish audience was just going to be more, it was going to be easier to have a protagonist named
what's
Thomas.
a Jonathan? Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Lucy Westenra's name was shortened in the Swedish version to Lucy Western, because that's probably easier to pronounce. It makes more sense. Fine. Yeah, like that. Oh, great. Okay. But if that's the case, then, like, why weren't a bunch of the other names changed? Why was it just those two? And more than that, like, if you look at Nosferatu as an example, all the characters' names were changed. They were changed to very German names. So from the English names. And one theory was that, like, well, you know, Prana Films was trying to escape copyright. But it turns out that that wasn't that big of an issue. And it was also possible that they were like, well, this is going to be shown to a German audience, and so we want this to, you know, be more easily digestible. But in doing so, they changed the location in Nosferatu from London, England, to Wisburg, Germany, and made it just, this is now a German story. That doesn't happen in the Swedish Dracula. That doesn't happen in Powers of Darkness. Sweden has nothing to do with the book. Like, it doesn't show up in there at all.
Yeah,
And
the
in fact,
Icelandic version is more Icelandic than the Swedish version is Swedish.
Also weird.
It's super weird. And, like, if anything, the Swedish version is more English. Like, it's like goes way into depth, more into like English neighborhoods and stuff like that. So it's like, what, like, and that's why I say, like, every time you're like, oh, but wait, there's always, every piece of evidence could also be contradicted. So there's it's absolute, like, this is just an unending Mandelbrot set of fractals of possibility that just keeps on going.
Yeah, and imagine trying to simplify and synthesize this information into
I can't, Iris. I'm really impressed that you guys are doing this.
it's mind bending, because not only are we dealing, and I've talked to Jeff about this a lot, not only are we dealing with 2014 and 2017 and 2025, we're also dealing with, you know, a period of time between 1897 and 1901. And we're dealing with research, Dracula research, that has taken place since, you know, basically the 70s, but definitely before, right? And so we're not always dealing with the most current research. And so
Yeah.
it's very it's it really is mind dumbing because you mind numbing, maybe dumbing too.
It's
Um,
that too, for sure.
and because I think we are working in a multi-dimensional kind of space here. Because when you were talking about, there was something you were talking about earlier, Sean, that was making me think, um, that we're actually dealing with some outdated information, and I forget what it was exactly, but that's the problem too. There are so many sources. Some are higher profile than others, but and the opinions change. Like much like the opinion of you know whether or not Dracula was based on the historical Vlad Dracula the Third,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
That
Right.
opinion has it changed and evolved over time,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and depending on what source you are referencing, right, you might say, oh, Bram obviously modeled his fictional character off of this historical figure. But if you're looking at a different source, you'll say, well, he actually didn't really know anything about the historical Vlad at all. And then
Yeah.
you might find some additional research that was, published in some obscure white paper somewhere and say, well, we have some proof here to say that he really knew actually a lot about Vlad. And so we're dealing with so many different dimensions that it becomes absolutely mind-boggling. It's
Ha-
crazy.
have you had late nights over this?
Um, yeah, of course. I mean, when your mind is going like this, I had one subject who very adorably but relatably related to me that like his wife was like, Stop talking about powers of darkness." Or like, she would get up and she would find him at the computer at 2 in the morning and be like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I had this idea and I had to research it." And it's like I can definitely relate to that. And my husband, God bless him, has been such a champion of this.
That's wonderful. That's
But
wonderful.
probably, but he knows that like when like Dracula comes out of my mouth, he's like bracing himself. Okay, here we go.
We were talking about
Excellent.
that with somebody else of, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Like Dracula in general, like what is it about Dracula, the Dracula myth, the story in general that just has pervaded the world throughout and it just sticks with us and every generation discovers it and gets obsessed with it. Like what is it about Dracula?
That is a good
What is
question,
it for
Jeff.
you? Answer it personally, Sean.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think like because everyone who has ever written about Dracula has also written about what their theories are as to why it's so universal and beloved by every generation. I think I think Dracula is I think it is it's so accessible to people because and vampires in general because there is a it's because of the taboo of the vampire. The vampire is a taboo. It is a dark lover. It's a dark harasser. It is a power that is unknowable, but it is in, at least in literature anyway, ironically, it's in a very fair form. And so, in that regard, the vampire almost always comes across as this sort of like a perfect partner, like a seducer, a perfect lover, only for you to then discover that this person is going to drain your life. Like this person is bad for you, and that's even more attractive. And so I think that coupled with the fact that the vampire is in many ways a mysterious or an answer to the mystery of what happens when we die. Like it's someone who managed to cheat it and keep on going. And so in that regard, that's also fascinating to us, especially when it comes with the price tag of you have to drink human blood in order to maintain it. There's something about that cocktail just really plugs into people.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't see the vampire or Dracula itself ever ending its cultural interest to people. I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, it is yin and yang, everlasting life predicated upon everlasting death and murder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Iris and I were talking, it's so interesting that in all these other monster stories that we still love and we still celebrate, you always fear and run away from the monster. But Dracula is unique in that you are seduced, you are drawn in, you seek him out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, in going down this rabbit hole of like, trying to study the process by which Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. And again, there are no answers, there's only speculation. But how amazing that he was able to take all of these different things that he liked, story elements that he liked, myths that he liked, characters that he liked, his love of the theater, like all these things, his love of the law, for God's sake, his love of typewriters, like all of this stuff he brings together into one book, and it just all clicks. And it just is this perfect storm. Whereas when you look at his other books, they're all just mediocre. Like, and that's part of that is, as a modern reader and you're reading something that was written 150 years ago, you're like, maybe it was good at the time. I don't know that these books were good at the time, and I don't think that they were reviewed very well. But Dracula was. And if you think about art in general and just the creative process, and you guys know this because you work in Hollywood, you're filmmakers, like, you always try to make something amazing. But there are so many elements that are sort of have to all come together in that synergy to truly transcend whatever your medium is. And you're lucky if that happens once. On average, it happens like 1 in 10 times. Like even the great master, the Coppolas, the Spielbergs, any particular master director or writer, Stephen King, like anybody like that, if you look at their work, you are really going to remember 1 out of 10 of the things that they made. And so Stoker he happened to like capture that lightning in a bottle with one book. And you're right. There are no long podcasts about Frankenstein. There are no multi-episode podcasts about The Mummy or Creature from the Black Lagoon or The Portrait of Dorian Gray or any of these things. Like Dracula is just, he's evergreen material. And I think it also helps that, as Dacre, I'm sure, has already told you, and which he is fond of saying, is that the copyright was very mismanaged for Dracula. And so it started getting riffed on, like by this Swedish paper, like by Prana Films for Nosferatu. Like all of these different people started adding their own stuff into Dracula. And now we have had 125 years of that. Mm-hmm. And so Dracula is more than just the book now. And you can say that about Frankenstein to some degree, you can say that about werewolves to some degree, but nowhere near the way you can about Dracula. It is now all of ours. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I was going with that. I was just going.
No, but insightful, and I think you're speaking to the thing inside of all of us that love the story. And you're right, it's evergreen. It's not going anywhere. It is undead forever.
Was there a moment where this really took hold for you? Do you
Powers of Darkness, or Dracula, or
yeah? I mean, because Dracula is usually our entry point to Powers of Darkness.
That's true. Yeah. It's a good question, Iris. I see you turning into the podcast interviewer right here before me. That's fabulous.
Right? That is so spot on. And this is a very weird, like out of body experience, to be on the other side of the interview,
I'm
like
sure.
reflexive thing going on. But yes, forgive me. It's true.
No, no,
Tell me if you care to share.
no, that's okay. That's okay. These guys have already heard this story a couple times before, but I think like so my Dracula was never my entry point into vampires. My entry point was the Lost Boys,
Oh yeah.
really. And by
Our review forthcoming at orwhatevermovies.com.
that is awesome. That is great to hear. Yeah, that movie changed me. And that is really kind of what I point to now. But on top of that, it is bolstered by two other things. One, I remember as a teenager, my dad telling me about the audiobook that he was listening to, which was called Interview with the Vampire, and he was describing it to me, and I was absolutely ensorcelled by it. Not enough to read the book until decades later. But everything that he was telling me about that story just really clicked for me. And then in college, I found out about Vampire the Masquerade, which is a live action role playing game. There was this really hot girl who was playing it. And I got involved in that group and fell in love with the genre. I wound up marrying that girl, by the way. So it was a really good, it was a good choice. But so I really sort of fell down the vampire rabbit hole and seeing what else was possible with that game. And so I didn't actually read Dracula until about 20 years ago. And maybe even just 15 years ago. Because as a kid who grew up on comic books and TV and movies, I didn't read that much literature. So later on in life as an adult, I was like, they've got good stories in these book things. Did everyone else know about this? So, but I was surprised when I read Dracula at how much it wasn't what I thought it was going to be because of all the movies and comics and television and stuff. But I was also surprised at the stuff that was in Dracula that you never see in any of the adaptations. I had never heard mention of the Sholomance before I read that book. And I was like, how in the hell have we gone 120 years of Dracula adaptations and nobody has ever mentioned the black magic Hogwarts that Dracula attended?
Yeah, the
when he was
Sholomance was part of the Count's backstory, like how he became a vampire.
Yeah, yeah. And so all of that to say that if you grow up and you're looking, at least, Gen X anyway, and your idea of Dracula is like, oh, it's Bela Lugosi or Frank Langella or Christopher Lee with the widow's peak and the cape with the red satin in it. It's kind of silly, and you're like, no, my vampires are more Lost Boys. They're more Fright Night. They're like a monster vampire. Like, that's cool. But then when you finally get to read Dracula, you recognize that, that's where all the DNA comes from. And those things that I loved in the 80s as a kid who was trying to figure out who he was owes all of that to Dracula.
Right.
And some of it to Anne Rice. But
without Dracula, if without Dracula, would there be a Lost Boys? Which
yeah.
Which is basically like the incarnation of it's like the mixture of the undead revenant immortal character with the primal idea that when you are young you feel immortal, right?
Yeah.
You're young and vivacious.
Good.
You don't even think about death, right? And they just and Joel Schumacher and Richard Donner just took that and made it part of coming of age, right?
Yeah.
This feeling of invincibility and immortality, and yes, all of these things, wouldn't be there. We wouldn't be here, I keep on saying, if
Exactly.
it didn't become what it became.
Exactly. And that, Iris, is a wonderful way to wrap this up, I think. Very concise. I don't want to keep you guys too long. I don't want to keep you guys too long. But real quick, how do people find you? How do they get a hold of you? How do they find your Kickstarter?
I think the easiest way is to go to Kickstarter.com and search up The Powers of Darkness. You'll find our project there. But if you really want to follow, go to orwhatevermovies.com. And there's a page now that's dedicated to The Powers of Darkness. And you can also find all of the other great movie reviews done by Iris and her brother Wes. They're really entertaining. So I would recommend go to Or Whatever Movies. All roads from there will lead you wherever you want to go. All the links are there.
And how do people, if they want to reach out, is there a way that they can contact you guys directly?
I suppose so. Yeah, you can follow us on TikTok, on Instagram, Facebook, all those things. There's also join our mailing list on Or Whatever Movies. And you can, if you want to email me directly, I'm ja@jdi.marketing. And, if you've got a business or anything that needs marketing, I'll be happy to help there too. Just plug.
Excellent. Excellent plug.
Yeah, and for Or Whatever Movies, contact, similarly, we take review requests, and we also love to just hear feedback on our discussions or your thoughts on different films. On The Lost Boys, for example, Fright Night is also available as a discussion on orwhatevermovies.com, and that is orwhatevermovies@gmail.com, and our text hotline 818-835-0473.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here and talking to us about this extremely exciting project that you're working on. It has been great having you. Best of luck with the Kickstarter, and I cannot wait to listen to this podcast.
I hope that you will find that all of your questions are answered, Sean.
Oh, lovely. That's what I'm looking for. Exactly.
Thank you for having us. It was such a pleasure to nerd out with you.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you, Sean.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.